Have you ever stepped into a place and felt like time just stopped? That's exactly how it feels inside Longwood, a pre-Civil War time capsule captured during a moment when life forever changed. Longwood was meant to be one of the grandest private homes in America, but when the Civil War began, construction came to an immediate halt. Workers walked away, leaving their tools exactly where they were. More than 160 years later, what remains isn't just an unfinished house. It's a tangible moment in time when life in America fundamentally shifted, a moment when immense fortunes and grand architectural ambition, built on enslaved labor, came to an abrupt end. These preserved bones of an almost southern grand home are studied today by architects and designers drawn to what was never meant to be seen, the exposed brick, raw framing, and construction details, exactly as they were when work stopped, leaving us with an architectural design time capsule for us to learn and gain inspiration from. Today, we're touring Longwood in Natchez, Mississippi, exploring the private rooms downstairs, learning about the people who imagined life in a home that was never finished, and walking through the unfinished upper floors that feel like stepping straight into a pre-Civil War time capsule. Hi, I'm Allie, and welcome back to Fab Little Dish, where we celebrate the love for vintage home, historic interiors, and the stories that live behind the walls. If you love touring historic houses filled with rich history and timeless design inspiration, then hit thumbs up and make sure to subscribe to help support the channel. Now, let's head to Natchez, Mississippi, and step inside Longwood. Longwood was built in 1859 and was meant to be the dream home of Haller Nutt and his wife Julia. Haller Nutt was a wealthy Mississippi plantation and businessman who made his fortune through cotton production and trade, an industry deeply tied to enslaved labor in the South before the Civil War. By the late 1850s, his success had grown dramatically, and he wanted a home that reflected not just his wealth, but his legacy. The house was designed by Samuel Sloan, a well-known Philadelphia architect, and from the very beginning, Longwood was ambitious. Instead of a traditional Southern plantation house, Haller chose an octagonal design, an unusual and very intentional decision. Octagonal homes were considered very progressive at the time and were believed to promote better airflow, more natural light. The couple pored over architectural pattern books together, and when they landed on Plan 49, Haller knew immediately this was it. The original plan called for 4 levels, but Haller requested 6, expanding the design dramatically. The home was topped with a bold onion-shaped dome inspired by Moorish and Middle Eastern architecture, which was considered fashionable and exotic among wealthy Americans in the mid-19th century at the time. To bring that vision to life, the architect Samuel Sloan brought around 70 skilled craftsmen and carpenters from Pennsylvania to Natchez. Construction began in 1860, and within about 18 months, the exterior of Longwood was nearly complete. But then, the world changed. When the Civil War broke out, construction didn't just slow down, it completely stopped. Many of the craftsmen working on Longwood were from the North, and as soon as news of the war reached Natchez, they left immediately. Others soon followed, either returning home or heading off to fight for the Confederacy. Almost overnight, the workforce disappeared. Haller believed, at least at first, the craftsmen would be able to return and finish the work on the house. We all know that never happened. Instead, local laborers were hired and enslaved workers helped finish the basement level, making it a livable space for the family. The unfinished mansion, with nearly $100,000 already invested into it, which was a fortune at the time, came to be known as Nutt's Folly. Haller Nutt's fortune was gone, and by the late 1860s, the estate was put up for public auction. Such a stark contrast for a home once meant to represent permanence and prosperity. One of Haller and Julia's sons, Sergeant Prentice Nutt, had become a lawyer, and he traveled to Washington, D.C., lobbying on behalf of his mother and his father's estate. The family filed claims against the federal government for losses suffered during the war, totaling a little over $850,000 worth of damages. They did receive $100,000 in return, just enough to keep Longwood from being lost forever. The family survived on selling milk, eggs, and vegetables from a wagon, such a dramatic shift from the life they once had imagined here. It wasn't until 1968 when Longwood was rescued from decay. It was purchased and later placed under preservation care with the condition that the upstairs remained exactly as it was and that the house was available to the public. In 1971, Longwood was designated a National Historic Landmark, and today we have the rare opportunity to walk through a piece of history, one that captures a turning point in America, frozen at the exact moment when everything changed. Separated by some tall oak trees stands the servants' quarter, a 3-story, 12-room structure built before construction on Longwood began. This building housed enslaved people and later served as the family's residence while the basement of the main house was being completed. Its presence is an essential part of the story. Longwood's grandeur, ambition, and overall vision were all made possible and later shaped by the labor that sustained it. The house cannot be understood without acknowledging the people who lived and worked here long before the family even moved into the basement. Hallernutt didn't live long after the war began. He died in 1864 from pneumonia, but many have said that he died of a broken heart from never seeing his grand vision completed and watching his fortune unravel as the world around him collapsed. After his death, Julia Nutt remained at Longwood with their children. She managed the property through an entirely new reality, one where wealth and status had evaporated, enslaved labor was gone, and survival required constant adjustment. The Nutt family lived here for decades after the war, spanning 3 generations. Longwood remained in the family ownership until 1970. The upstairs was never completed, not once, and it always stood as a constant reminder of a way of life that would never survive the world as it now existed. We're now in the finished basement of Longwood, and this is where things start feeling a little more personal. Of the 32 rooms originally planned for this house, only 9 were ever completed, all of them down here. This first room would have originally been intended as a billiard room once the house was completed. Instead, it became the family's entryway and parlor, the main gathering space during the decades they lived here. This is a German-made piano by the Steiff Company, one of the original pieces of furniture here from 1861. Julia wanted it down here once it arrived, so the children could learn and practice piano. And this room was originally planned as a smoking room, positioned right next to the billiard room for easy access, but it served as the main bedroom for the family. The mahogany bed and dresser also belonged to Julia, anchoring this room firmly in her comforts and tastes. This room would have been Hallernutt's downstairs basement office, but it ended up serving as the temporary room for the family's 4 sons. Haller's original desk is still down here, along with a copy of Samuel Sloane's architectural pattern book. This is the very book that he and Julia used to select design number 49, the design for Longwood. Seeing it in this room makes the scale of the ambition feel incredibly real. What really stands out here is how closely the family lived together. The rooms are tight, functional, almost compressed though, and I couldn't help feeling that when they were all living down here during the uncertainty of the Civil War, this must have been a sense of comfort to be so close to each other. The portrait here shows Charles R. Nutt, Haller's son who inherited Longwood and lived here for many years after the war. By this point, the family's wealth and lifestyle had changed dramatically and continued to deteriorate. Charles became known as a local, complicated, often eccentric man, someone who carried the weight of what Longwood represented, which is a life that could have been lived, but never actually stood a chance. This room was supposed to be the children's playroom, but it ended up serving as the temporary girls' bedroom. Above the fireplace are portraits of the oldest 2 daughters, Carrie Ruth on the left and Mary Ellen on the right. Carrie Ruth married but tragically died shortly after childbirth. Mary Ellen never married and never had children. I wonder if her sister's fate had anything to do with that. You really could feel the emotion that must have occurred throughout these walls, especially in such tight quarters. I'm sure this family was very emotionally bonded to one another. Julia remained living in the basement for 33 years after her husband's death, and she passed away in here in 1897 at the age of 75. On the nightstand are photographs of the 2 youngest daughters. Julia, named after her mother, later went into the cattle business and never married. Lily, the youngest, married James Ward, and together they had 5 children, 2 daughters and 3 sons. And this photograph shows those 3 sons. Haller and Julia's grandsons One of them, Merritt, is pictured standing on a wooden ramp right here. He would become the last grandson to live in the basement. After his death, the house sat vacant for nearly 30 years before it had a chance at another life again. This space was originally planned as a servants' hall, but it became the family's dining room. Hanging overhead is a punka fan, sometimes called a shoe fly fan in the South. We've also seen this in other southern homes we've toured. It's used to circulate air and also to shoo away pests. Most of the china you see here has been carefully matched to this one piece. This is the only piece that's original in the whole set. It is a soup tureen. And this original oxblood marble fireplace surround is just breathtaking. Details like this give us a sense of how grand the Nuts wanted their living spaces to be, even if this was technically a basement. This central space connects much of the basement and holds one of the most special pieces in the house, a portrait of Frederick. This is one of the only 2 known formal painted portraits of an enslaved person in Mississippi, dating to the 1840s. Frederick was Holler Nutt's personal servant, but also his closest companion. They grew up together as boys on Holler's family plantation, fishing and hunting together. As adults, Holler brought Frederick with him, and Frederick remained with Julia and the children even after Holler's death in 1864. Also notice the skylights here. They'll become especially important when we head upstairs, a reminder that even below ground, this house was designed to draw light from upward. Here, we see on display the original plans of the upstairs and the basement. After seeing how one of these floor plans looks in real life and having just walked through the finished basement, it's hard to wrap your head around the elaborate vision that was being imagined and planned for the upstairs. Now we're stepping upstairs into the part of Longwood that was never meant to be seen in this state to the public. This is the principal level of the house, the main floor where guests would have entered and where the grandest rooms were planned. Everything you see here is structural brick, but none of it was meant to remain exposed. The interior walls would have been plastered smooth, and the exterior brick would have been finished in stucco, giving Longwood the polished, almost palace-like appearance Holler Nutt envisioned. Even the bricks themselves tell a story. They were made right here on the property by the hands of the enslaved. Above this level, the house was designed to rise dramatically. The next 2 levels would have been dedicated bedroom floors. Above that, a 5th level solarium, and at the top, a 6th level observatory. The observatory was meant to be crowned by a massive domed cupola, ringed with 16 windows, each nearly 13 feet tall. At the base of the dome, mirrors were planned to reflect sunlight downward, channeling light through skylights all the way into the basement and living spaces below. That's why I called out that skylight earlier before we came up here. Even underground, this house was designed to be filled with light. The stairs we see here are the original construction worker stairs, used only by those workers. If Longwood had been completed, those stairs would have never existed. Instead, guests would have seen a grand spiral staircase rising through the center of the home. All around these upper floors, you'll notice brick niches built directly into the walls. These were designed to display marble statues imported from Italy, sculptures that never actually arrived. Silent placeholders of a vision that was never fulfilled. This room, the one with the buckets scattered all over, it would have served as the formal reception room. What's extraordinary here is that many of the objects you see are exactly where they were left in 1861. A worker's bench, paint cans, tools. When news of the Civil War reached Natchez, this is where work immediately stopped. Laborers walked away and no one ever returned to finish the job. This wide brick space would have been the formal dining room. To achieve the octagonal angles of the house, builders created these custom 5-sided bricks, an incredibly labor-intensive detail that speaks just to how serious this project was taken. Nothing here was standard, everything was over the top, and it really makes you wonder what this room would have looked like if it was completed. This would have been a family room. The crates and carved wood fragments scattered here throughout gives us a glimpse of just how ornate Longwood was meant to be. Decorative trim, detailed woodwork, layered finishes. Here, you see the original wooden finial that once stood on top of the roof. Today, the finial you see on the exterior is a fiberglass replica molded directly from this original piece. And this room was intended to be the breakfast room. Everything you see here was left behind when construction stopped. Toolboxes, crates, fragments of the daily work that was never packed up or moved out. This is the exact moment when work ended, when hammers were set down and Longwood was never touched ever again. The exterior walls of Longwood measure an astonishing 26 inches thick. The closer you look, the clearer it becomes that this house was designed to rival some of the grandest homes in the South. This final space would have been the drawing room, the center of social life. The piano currently downstairs in the parlor was meant to live here. It arrived in this big crate, and it still remains here. This room would have been used for entertaining, conversation, and music. It's also the only room in the house designed with fireplaces on both ends, emphasizing its importance as a gathering space. Longwood was never meant to be unfinished. It was envisioned as one of the grandest private homes in America, built at the height of Southern wealth and brought to a standstill the moment the Civil War reshaped the nation. What remains here isn't just the bare bones of a house. It's evidence of a world that never resumed as planned. That's why walking through Longwood feels unlike any other home I've stepped through. You're not just seeing how people lived, you're standing inside the moment when America changed forever. I hope you enjoyed this tour of Longwood. Thank you so much for stepping inside with me. Make sure you're not only subscribed, but also hit that notification bell so you never miss one of my house tours. I have a few more Southern homes coming your way next, followed by so many more that I have planned across the country. Until the next one, my friends, keep enjoying the beauty of vintage home. Au revoir.